Hello, everyone. This is Elizabeth Preston,
And I'm Sarah Adams,
and you're listening to
the Writing Docs podcast.
where we discuss how businesses can help their teams to become better and more confident writers. If your team needs help achieving positive writing outcomes, then contact us at 877-249-7483 or email us at info@hurleywrite.com.
Hi, everyone. This is Sarah Adams, and I'm an executive consultant at Hurley Write. And you're listening to the Writing Docs podcast, where we talk about how businesses can help their team members to become better and more confident writers. I'm here with my co-host, Elizabeth Preston. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone.
I'm also really excited to have Michael Santarcangelo here with us on our podcast today as well. Michael, welcome to the show. So, Michael has a bachelor's of science in human ecology with an emphasis on policy analysis from Cornell University. He has used his education to apply scientific methods to the assessment and analysis of people throughout his career. For many years, he was focused on the fields of cybersecurity and technology, a trailblazer in the cybersecurity field, creating and hosting one of the first and most successful cybersecurity podcasts. He also has published a number of articles on cybersecurity, as well as a book, Into the Breach: Protect Your Business by Managing People, Information, and Risk. Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. It's exciting to be here. And it's
That's
really weird to hear your bio when you're listening to it. It's like, wow, I did some of that. That's cool.
Yeah, you've done
You did a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like that you've sort of brought it full circle to helping others even outside of the industries that you really originally started in. Now, you have said that two of the major parts of the work that you do, helping business leaders and professionals find clarity, number one, and number two, helping them embrace and use friction to create value, or reducing friction, navigating friction. I want to start with that first part about clarity, because one thing at Hurley Write that we do is we talk a lot about clarity and clear communication, and how that can lead to more efficiency and less time and money wasted. So tell us about what you see as causing problems with
Yeah.
clear
First of
thinking.
all, we're very simpatico on that. Like that's part of the reason I'm excited to be here. For that, things that are getting in the way, it comes down to time. Clarity takes time. You guys know this for writing, right? The work is in the revision. But
Mm-hmm.
we have people that are sending half-baked first drafts of ideas that they didn't think through. Well, it takes time,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're in an environment where you're doing knowledge work. I mean, I always laugh, but it takes time for knowledge to work. And so what happens is people are in situations where they have too many priorities. They haven't learned, or they don't feel empowered to say no or to make hard choices as to what the priorities are. So now they're in a situation where they have conflicted priorities, they have competing priorities. They have this thing I call the tyranny of the urgent, where it gets dumped on you, and either based on who's asking or how it's being asked, that jumps to the top of your stack. Now the attention residue builds. We only have so much energy, and we have things we have to get done. So instead of
Mm-hmm.
thinking them through, we just fire them off. And that just creates a snowball effect of bad things.
I think every person listening could probably relate to what you just said, whether it comes to writing or any other task. Elizabeth and I
Yeah.
just came from a meeting where we were talking about even just overthinking. And I think when we overthink, we put things off, and then we don't allow ourselves enough time to complete these tasks. And it feels like walking a tightrope.
There's an interesting thing about overthinking too, which is it creates a dopamine reaction in us.
Hmm.
Sometimes just thinking about something gives us the appearance that we've done something about it, and it almost becomes a comfortable place. So when you see somebody, or if you find yourself indulging in overthinking a lot, it's easy to say, well, that's my superpower. I think a lot, I think too much. Yeah. And that's probably getting in the way of the clarity that you want. And it's probably getting in the way of the action that you need to take.
Hmm.
You also mentioned the tyranny of urgency. Is that what it's called, Michael?
Yeah, I just call it the tyranny of the urgent, but it's urgency is acting as a tyrant.
I like that.
So that's really something tough, I think, because you get coworkers that need something or people you supervise that need help. And how do you prioritize that? How do you make sure your team has what they need, but that your priorities are not getting lost in the way? What is your advice
There
on
you go.
that?
Well, and I want to add some more color to it because you nailed it. Now, there's one other piece to it. A lot of times, the tyranny of the urgent comes from the executive suite, or it comes from maybe somebody that we report to in an organization.
Mhm.
The irony is they're not always asking you to do something that's urgent. They're inartful in their questioning, or they're inartful in their comment, and it gets interpreted. It gets interpreted as an executive ask. It gets interpreted as, oh, I better go do this and I better go do it now. And
Mhm.
so when you ask what we can do to combat that, first thing to do, frankly, take a deep breath and then say to the person, are you asking me to do this now? Now, sometimes it's obvious, right? I mean,
Mhm.
somebody, especially if you're in the office and somebody's standing at your desk or your cube, they probably want it now. But even then, you can clarify to somebody. We are so good at being helpful that we are so quick to sacrifice ourselves, and we only have so much time and we only have so much attention. The challenge is we don't tend, right? This is where clarity comes back into it. If we're not clear on our goal, even if it's for the day or for the next hour, it becomes easy to be displaced. It was really interesting because if you ask most people, the opposite of distraction, right? In tyranny of the urgent is a distraction. Very seldom is tyranny of the urgent important or the
Mhm.
highest priority. It's just urgent, and right? So we tend to look at it. The opposite of distraction, everybody says, oh, it's focus. It's not. It's traction. The opposite of distraction is traction. Well, to make traction, you have to know what you're making traction toward. That's the clarity. When you don't have that clarity, it's really hard to say no. It's really easy to just tacitly say yes, which then means you're saying no to the stuff that's important to you. But as we've already said, if I've got 30 things on my docket,
Mhm.
well, okay, I can do this.
Now, this is probably something leaders struggle with as well, but do you think some of that is that urgency? We want to immediately please people.
Absolutely.
And and that can be a real drain on our time, something that causes friction as well, because then we start to kind of lose track, like you said, of ourselves and what we actually need to accomplish, and it's about pleasing everyone.
Spot on. What I talk about a lot is that we get disconnected from our value. And we've got time to talk about value, but what happens when you get that disconnection is then you don't see your value anymore. And when you don't
Mhm.
see your value, you feel horrible. You get to Friday and you're kind of dreading it. You feel lousy. Sunday night, you don't want to be back at work on Monday. And as all that starts to happen, then fear kicks in. And we have a tribal fear of literally being left in the woods because we don't belong to the group. And so
Mhm.
if I don't, they ask for this, they need it, I've got to do it. This is how I'm going to show my value. This is how, and it's counterproductive because as you point out, it starts to create friction. And this is the kind of friction that burns people out. They stop trusting you. They're just tired. They don't want to deal with it. So but we don't realize it, right? We don't think about
Mhm.
it. We just get caught in a cycle. It sneaks in. And then one day we wake up unhappy and miserable and we hate everybody and we don't know why.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. I feel like you could be charging us money for counseling services right now. Maybe I'm maybe I should just speak for myself here. But you really just gave me the keys to thinking about better, clearer communication, not only in the workplace, but personally as well. It's about knowing my value. And a lot of us, our personal lives come into the workplace whether we want to do that or not. Talk to me about knowing your value, both personally and professionally, because that's something, again, that you can bring into the workplace positively or negatively.
Absolutely. So there's a few things I want to distinguish too, because I've been working on communication and helping people communicate more effectively for 20 plus years. But somewhere early in that process, it became, will help us communicate value. So I've been really paying attention to value. So the way I start to look at it is there's value, the general concept. And to keep it simple, I always think of value as improving the condition. Right. So like there's I think it's a Warren Buffett quote, price is what you pay, value is what you get.
Mhm.
Right. And the other way to think about that is that price is what you pay, cost is also what you pay. Like there's a price that you pay, but there's a cost. So if it takes time, if it takes energy, if it takes attention, there's a cost. Value is what's left over. I think it's a good way to think about it, because a lot of times people will tell you, and they're completely correct, by the way, and this fits into our own value. Value gets confusing because we're going to tell people what's subjective. Well, it changes. It's positional. All true statements.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not as variant as everybody thinks that it is. Otherwise, a lot of the marketplaces where we establish value for things like coins, Bitcoin today is the rage, playing cards or trading cards, all these different things, right? There's a marketplace that establishes value and certain criteria for it. And there's still some room in there. All right. So when you look at value in terms of the ability to serve, it's the ability to improve somebody's condition or to improve your condition. That works for business value. Also, it starts to work for our own value. And then what I separate that into is intrinsic value, or your unique value, and your economic value. So what happens a lot of times, if you say to somebody, you say their value, they interpret that as their worth. I'm not worried about their worth. I mean, they should be worried about their worth, and I'm going to honor it. But what I think about a lot of times is that your unique value, right? There's 8 billion people on the planet. Each of us is unique, and each of us has value. And that value is encoded on our stories. So when you think about your unique value, it's the sum of the experiences that you've had, the conflicts that you've survived, right? And I don't mean violent physical conflict, although that may be an interesting story too. It's looking at what are the things that you've done that represent growth? What are the resolutions? What are the lessons that you've learned? What are the problems that you've solved? What are the things that you've accumulated along that path? And then you start to realize you have a pretty cool, unique set of skills. There's a skill stack. There's a combination of things based on your experience and the way that your brain chemistry works and the things that you've done. And it's remarkable. But we never taught people to tap into that. And we never taught people that your value may even look like somebody else's, but you're not in competition. We feel like we're in competition. We're bred, certainly in the Western world, to be in competition. And I think it's tragic. The economic value, on the other hand, is pretty easy. You're at work, you get paid money. You run your own company, you get paid money. Here's the simplest way to understand your economic value. Take your salary. Gross salary is fine. This is a rounded number. Take the last 3 digits off it, divide it by 2. So let's say you make $100,000 a year. Take 100, divide by 2. Simple math, $50 an hour. That's the relative value of your economic value at work. That's the dollar value of your economic value at work. That becomes really useful because now you can look at the tasks that you're working on. If you're doing $10 tasks and you're a $50 resource, that's dumb. If you're a leader and you have a team doing that, you're dumb. And you have to take a portfolio mindset. And then you start saying, so now this is where understanding your value gets really kind of fun, because then you can say, well, what can I do to increase my unique value in a way that also increases my economic value?
Wow.
I think a lot of understanding your value, both the economic value and the personal value, your unique value, requires clear thinking. And we've talked
100%.
about some of the things that happens when you don't have clear thinking. You end up saying yes to everything. You end up feeling burned out. Are there other sort of symptoms we can try to identify, particularly for leaders and managers, where they can say, hey, I'm not having clear thinking?
Absolutely. Procrastination is a big one. We tend to procrastinate things. Think about times in your life where it's clear what you want. You don't delay. You get after it because you're excited about it or it's clear. Now, there may be some situations where it's clear what has to get done. You're not excited about it and you delay. It's a different situation. Poor decision making. We don't make good decisions when we don't have clear, which is different than saying I'm making a decision on incomplete or bad information. It's just people ask when somebody's unclear, ask them what their decision-making process was. They have no idea. They don't know. We do poor problem solving. If you're feeling on an individual basis, it's the brain fog. It's the lethargy. You don't feel right. You can't think right. You really do find yourself squinting your eyes a lot and kind of crowding over. You're physically impacted by it. Anxiety, I think, comes in a lot. The lack of clarity, I think, breeds anxiety. You get confusion. In fact, that's probably the simplest thing, right? The simplest sign of a lack of clarity and a lack of clear thinking is confusion. Now, there are things that are complex, but they don't have to be confusing.
Let me ask you this. Is this something that leaders who come to you find that everything you just described is a real blind spot for them? Or do they come to you with sort of an awareness like, yeah, this is something I'm struggling with. I need your help?
Here's what they normally tell me. I'm overwhelmed and I'm constantly reacting. There's a concept in boxing of being on your back foot or martial arts. With some limited exceptions, you don't want to be on your back foot. It means you're completely off balance. You're not stable. And so usually when I encounter somebody, they'll say something to me of, I'm overwhelmed, constantly reacting, there's conflicting priorities. I'm not sure how to process it. I don't know how to help. I'm struggling with my team. I'm struggling with my colleagues. And so that struggle will come into, they're not listening to me. Think about this, right? You guys help people communicate clearer through writing. Okay, well, when you write garbage and it's redundant and it's not edited and you've buried the best stuff and it's not formatted for reading, well, of course no one's reading it. So they're self-aware. The leaders I work with, and I'm selective, they're self-aware that something's not right and that it doesn't need to be that way, and that they're willing to say, it could be me. But do they have those blind spots? No, and I'll give you a common one. I encounter this with most leaders. At some point, they'll say something to the effect of, if they just did what I said, I wouldn't be in this situation. And
Well, we
instead
hear
of
that a
fighting, I'll
lot.
indulge them. I'll go, great, show me what you said. And I look at it and I go, okay, well, let's abstract back. Could you do anything with that? And most of them have a sobering moment where they say, yeah, that's not real clear. Okay, cool. Got it.
What are the steps to having clearer thinking and ultimately either increasing or demonstrating our value? One, it sounds like you have to pull back and you have to reflect that there is a problem.
Yeah. So let's do these two different ways. The first part, how do we increase that clarity? It's time. It's time and space. And this is where we overlap really well. I really think clarity comes through writing. A lot of people that I work with will tell me how comfortable they are communicating and how we like to verbalize and we like to talk things out. And I put a lot of value in that. It's interesting for me because a lot of people have known me as a professional speaker for years, but I'm a writer I'm an author, but I'm a writer first. And for me, I like to write because writing lets me see what I'm thinking. And when you see it and you make it visible, it is magical. And it's fascinating to me how many people resist this part of the process. They don't journal. They don't keep logs. They just, I don't know how they do it. If I ask them to write stuff down, they're very reticent to do it. If I say, cool, I'll guide it. Let's go. Same questions. And we start making sense out of it. Like you watch them start to, like they see their ideas. And when you see your ideas, there are blind spots in our brain. There's things that we don't take a look at. And for some reason, when we get it out on paper, now you can see it. And it could be digital paper. I have done this handwriting and whiteboards and digital whiteboards and just typing with an open document, and they all work fine. This is not about making the strong connection between how your body moves and what your brain thinks. There's a lot of value there too. But to me, it's time. No, there are some people who really don't like silence. So go for it. How many times have you guys noticed, right? You get in the shower, you get great ideas. You go for a walk, you get great ideas, right? Do some deep breathing before you go to bed, you get some great ideas. So clarity needs time. And in that time, I often think it's the ability to listen. It's the ability to listen to yourself. Or if you embrace more of a sublime, it's the ability to listen to your higher self, which is where I think the real value in that clarity comes from. But our brains, we don't like confusion. We want to find some of those patterns. So you have to stop jamming, noise in your ears and in your eyes and give yourself some time and some space. And the challenge I see with a lot of folks is they don't. Like they'll say they will, but then I got to check this email. Well, I got to respond to this thing. Well, I'm going to play one more game on my phone real quick, or, oh, this thing happened over there. Oops, squirrel. And so we didn't really give ourselves the time in that space. Now, the way that connects back to your value then is that once you're disconnected from your value, right? The way I like to see it is once you're disconnected from your value, everything becomes tougher for you. So if you don't recognize, right? And I use that intentionally, recognize. If you don't recognize your own value, two really bad things happen. One, nobody else is going to see it either. And you're going to struggle to see value in other people. I usually mock this as like the Facebook effect, but we could just call it social media effect. People are more interested in putting up pictures and getting likes because it gives them some sense of value, because externally somebody said, you did good. I really like that. It's
Mhm.
hollow. It doesn't really last. And think about how much power you gave somebody else over your story and your sense of satisfaction. But in order to reconnect with your value, you have to start to see the things that you've done. Now, here's the cool part. When you recognize your value, it's easier to realize value in other people because you're not competing anymore. It's much easier to be collaborative to it. And that's going to come back to seeing your work. See, when you see your work, when you see your value, you can show it. You can choose to show it. It's easier to contribute the value. It's easier to get recognized for the value. But we have to be able to show our value to somebody, which is different than delivering value. But if we're talking about our intrinsic value, okay, well, what does it look like? What's your unique value look like? Show me. Most people struggle with that.
Wow. I might actually find myself taking notes, and I don't usually do that during our podcast. Note to self, do this. Note to self, remember this. This is great stuff. And,
Thanks.
before the show started, we were talking, Elizabeth and I were talking with you about this idea of friction. And Elizabeth, you had some questions about friction specifically.
Yes. First of all, Michael, what is friction? Because we kind of hear these words and we kind of had a gut feeling like, yeah, I think that's it. But I think having that definition helps us pick it out in our own lives. That way we could deal with it and either get rid of it or find ways around it or smoothen it out. So, first, what is friction?
Yeah, I think I love that you asked that. And if we, so a lot of the stuff I do, I like to be at some level of precision or accuracy. So like we could get it, I would prefer not to, but like we get into a whole thing on like friction and the physics of friction and the science of friction. But if you abstract it up to its highest layer, friction is a resistance of movement. And so I tend to look at friction as our unspoken, our unseen enemy, and that's great because I'd prefer that we had a foil that was something that was a force, not people and not situations. But then what's kind of interesting if you think about it is that friction, then as I like to describe it, friction is resistance. So it's not all negative. So there's two interesting things. If somebody tells you they want it to be frictionless, unless they're talking about a high-end machine where they need super lubricants because they really don't want any friction, that's a red herring. Like or at least a red flag. Like I don't want something to be frictionless. Go back to traction. You need some friction in order to make traction. So what I end up talking about is the friction that enters into our lives that's preventing the progress that we want to make. And it often shows up as something called resistance. And what's interesting is if you delve into resistance at all, Stephen Pressfield advanced this in his book, The War of Art. And he talks about resistance is that little voice in your head getting in the way. That little voice in the head, my words now, not his, but it's telling you lies. It's telling you you're not good enough. You can't do this. You're not right. And what you find is the more important the work that you're doing, the closer to your purpose in life, man, does that resistance flare up. But you see it in corporations all the time. You see it on teams all the time. There's a resistance to change. By the way, that's natural. Just so everybody understands, resistance to change is the natural state. People say, "Oh, I love change." No, you don't. It's not biologically likely. I mean, maybe, but not likely. So what happens then is we say, okay, so there's friction. Friction resists movement. Friction slows things down. And it can be used positively. But for the most part, when I look at friction, I look at it in one of three main categories: communication, process, or technology. And friction in communication is as simple as saying the color blue. We could all say, oh, yeah, no, I know what blue is. Really? Because Pantone's got like how many thousands of variants of blue? And there's a huge difference between midnight blue and sky blue. Huge. Even though we're both talking about the sky. And so what happens a lot of times is friction in communication comes in when we assume that the other person knows exactly what we're talking about. Well, I said the words. And this happens a lot with people that are they're very technical because they believe that the words are very precise and therefore there can only be one meaning. I've never looked up a dictionary word that only has one meaning. I'm sure there is one, and that's cool. But like from a point. So what happens then is that friction creeps in. This is why it's the enemy. This is why I don't like it. I mean, if you want to say to me, for example, right, all the time I spent in cybersecurity, Well, wouldn't friction be good to slow down attackers? Hell yeah, it'd be great. Like, let's do more of that. I'm in all day. What I'm talking about characteristically is the friction that creeps in that we don't see. It's invisible. It's on the edges, it's on the margins, but we feel it. And it goes kind of like this. You go to the meeting, everybody says yes, so they got big smiles on their back. You leave, and 3 days later, you get that boomerang that says, "Oh, I didn't agree to that. I don't remember that. Oh, I didn't understand." Oh, I can predict it coming out of meetings. I can even sometimes predict who's going to do it just based on how they handle themselves in the meeting. So if you think about it, friction then is antithetical to value, right? Because value. So let's talk business value for a second. Let's not talk about our unique value or our economic value. Value is that capacity to improve a situation. So at work, the way that we deliver value is we solve problems. So you got to solve the right problems and you got to pick the right path. And the path is the one that allows you to deliver the value the fastest, because the longer you delay, the less value on average you're going to deliver. The longer it takes, the more money you're going to spend, the more people who are involved, etc., the more friction you're going to encounter. Friction erodes value. There are people that when you say it to them, they will smile and laugh and then say, "Oh man, you just described my last project." And I've learned to say, so like no value out of the gate, they're like negative value out of the gate. Boom. But because we're talking about friction in communication, friction also destroys trust. So it erodes value, and that sucks, but it destroys trust. So now we all know that there's that person on the team you just don't go to. There's that group you just don't want to deal with. There's that whatever you just yeah, because you don't have trust. If you don't have trust, you can't have psychological safety. You're going to operate much more in a state of fear, which means you're going to do a lot more bad things that are going to create more friction. And then it just kind of burns people out because it's tiring, right? Because friction, there's an energy component. Like if you look again, if you go back to physics, friction deals with energy. Okay, well, let's deal with people. So friction doesn't only slow you down, it drains you. It takes your energy away, it burns you out.
So
It's interesting you say that communication and process friction because we see that a lot at Hurley Wright. And all of this meshes together where we will see resistance to change their review process, for instance. But the review process is creating friction. You're getting a lot of rounds of review that are unnecessary. You're getting a lot of miscommunications. I've even seen some where this poor lady came and she's like, "My supervisor hates me because of everything that he's putting back in my writing, all the feedback." Now, maybe your supervisor did hate her. I don't know. But I would guess that it's that same thing you were talking about. He's talking midnight blue. She's talking sky blue. They think they're talking the same language, but there is no common language for the review process. So they get that friction. And at least for her, she was certainly feeling that burnout you were talking about. And she was thinking about quitting that job, moving on. She's like, "I don't know what I'm going to do." And we hate to see this. We hate to see people miserable with writing. We hate to see that friction. So I do see what you mean, where everything comes together to create one big mess. Or a goat
Well,
rodeo, as you have said
I love goat
before.
rodeos. Yeah, it's like herding cats, right? But I think goat rodeos are more entertaining, and goats, they don't really care. They're going to do what they want. But what you also described there then is that as that friction builds, and if it builds unchecked, then everything gets more complex and it takes longer. Then it's more costly. And then it's even more draining, right? And so, yeah. And by the way, they probably delved into arguing about blue, but really what needed to happen was green. But they never asked that question. They got so fixated on who was right with the color of blue that they didn't even say, "Are we supposed to be doing blue?"
so give us some hope. How can companies reduce this friction and have clearer communication? What's the answer?
Make it visual, make it visible. And this is so, like, we ask about like, how does writing help? That's how writing helps, because a lot of times if you start writing, the other thing I like for this one too is draw the picture, right? Like picture pages level, boxes and arrows. Show me how it works. Tell me where the friction is, and then tell me whether you like it there or not. And what I find is most people couldn't describe it. They can't describe it. They can't describe it out of the gate. They can't tell you how they think it should work. They can't necessarily tell you how it does work. So whether you're writing it down, narrative format, or you're just sketching a high level diagram and say, "Show me where it goes," it's pretty eye-opening. But it's just like we said before, when you start writing down your thoughts, when you can make something visual, then you can see it. It's a different sense, it's a different experience. And that's where the writing really comes in, because the writing gives you the ability to then add context, to tell the story, to capture the emotion to that. In business, we keep saying, oh, it's business, we can't have emotion. Why? Every decision's emotional. We're emotional creatures. I mean, sure, there's a balance to it, but I think removing it. So what I find is just being able to name it and say, hey, I'm feeling the friction here, means you're not competing with each other anymore, right? I would much prefer people chose collaboration over competition. And the way that we start to do that is we realize that, hey, we all can have unique value. We can apply it in ways that give us different economic value. And our unique and our economic value is what allows us to contribute to solving problems at work. What if we work together on that instead of competing on our value, or who got more likes, or who got less red marks on their paper type of thing?
The identifying and the drawing out, is that part of your straight talk starter exercise, or is that separate?
A little bit. So what happened about 8 years ago, maybe 9 years ago, I was doing an event, and I'll keep this tight, but it's an interesting story, because it was a really good morning working with a group of security leaders, and we were talking about leadership, and we were talking about communication. And we were going through maybe a lot of the same stuff we were just talking about to some level. And a person gets up at lunchtime and, to the effect of like, hey, I'm Tom, and we're one of the sponsors. And so now it's my turn to sell you type of thing. And it was like, oh, this is going to be bad. And by the way, it was bad. But he said one thing that sparked me, and he said, I've been selling to you guys for 10 years, and I'm going to tell you what it's really like. And I went, oh, this could be good. No, it was a false flag. It was useless. It completely blew the experience and the opportunity. But I had a moment, and I wrote down some questions. And the first question I wrote was, what problem are you trying to solve? And then I wrote a couple other questions. And so we get to the end of the day, and everybody gets together for a couple of drinks afterwards. And he's like, dude, you did great. How did I do? And I really tried hard to be gracious. And I was like, I think you seeded your value in like the first 30 seconds. Turns out that was just a classy way of punching him in the gut in front of his entire team. But then what had happened was, he's like, well, what would you have done? And I pulled out and I read the 5 questions. Now, one of the questions was like, am I tall enough to ride the ride? And that type of stuff. I've since changed them up. So I'm going to tell everybody like what it got to, but that's where Straight Talk started. And one other really cool thing happened. A bunch of the security leaders were there, and they said, oh yeah, Tom, why didn't you answer those questions? Without being a jerk this time, I looked at them, a couple of them, and I said, hey, if Tom put the PO in front of you today, the purchase order, for you to sign that, are you authorized to sign it, or do you have to go to somebody else to get it signed? And if you have to go to somebody else to get it signed, could you answer the same questions? And could you translate them into meaningful value in your organization? And it turns out the answer to that question was no. So for a while, it was 3 questions. But so here's the idea behind Straight Talk. It came down to this simple idea, right? The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So the shortest distance between 2 people or 2 groups of people is straight talk. And what I wanted with Straight Talk was it was a direct connection with somebody else, but it's based on value. And the value is calibrated to what's valuable to them. It can be what's valuable to you, but Straight Talk is not brash. It's not abrupt. It's not being rude to people. It's not, I'm going to tell you what I think. It's almost the literal opposite. It's saying, I'm going to take time to clarify my thinking so that I clarify my communication to you, and I can give you what you need in a concise, direct, simple package. And it's really then what I like to tell people, it's honesty with empathy. So a lot of people, when they're around me enough, they'll be like, man, you're really blunt. And I'll check. Was I rude? No. Did I insult you? No. Did I upset you? No. Cool. That's Straight Talk. So I have this thing I call the Straight Talk Starter. And its idea is just to get the ideas out of your head and make them visual. So this is a written exercise. Now, if somebody wants to sketch, that's fine. But what happens is a lot of people hold all their ideas in their head. And I don't know how they do it, because there's too much chaos in the world. There's too much chaos at work. There's just so much going on in our brains that you need to get it out so you can see it. So the Straight Talk Starter is just that. And there are no rules. And it kind of throws people off, but there's no rules. But here are the 3 questions. What problem are you trying to solve? Why is it valuable to solve this problem now? How can we deliver that value faster? That's it. Now, I'll be straight. There are sub questions to that, and there's qualifiers, and you can go on a whole goat rodeo if you want to. You don't need to. That's it. All I do is, and to warm people up, I usually start by saying, hey, just tell me the context. Like, how did we even get here? And then you just answer those 3 questions as best as you can. You can bounce between them. There's no right answer, no wrong answer. When I'm doing it with myself or when I'm facilitating with somebody, I just say, just tell me what comes to mind and we'll group things together. Once you get it out, you can give it time. You guys got to know about percolation and incubation. Like, you got to give your stuff space to breathe. So it is possible that after even 10 or 20 minutes of this, although typically, like if I do like a starter session with somebody, we book it for 50 minutes. I give them 5 minutes to wind me up, tell me what's going on. We spend about 10 minutes or so per question, take a deep breath, and we go back and I review it. And I say, okay, now that you're seeing it, what are you seeing? What are you thinking? What kind of clicked? Sometimes the pattern pops out right away. Sometimes it doesn't. In which case, then incubate, right? Let it grow for a little bit, percolate. So if you do the straight talk starter, the idea is simple. Get the ideas out of your head. It lends itself then, right? So the scaffolding level, the idea is, how do you make it safe for someone else to engage with you? How do you make it safe to, make your ideas known or do any of those types of things? And that's it. You don't need any special training. There's no anything. Answer the question. Well, I don't know how to answer it. Why is it valuable to do this? Well, I don't know what value is. Sure you do. Go. Like, now, you keep doing it, you get better at it. You keep doing it, you get nuanced with it. There's, like I said, there's a ton of depth around it. So where do you go? Where do you go from there? I don't know. Tell me what you figured out. The common thing I see is people say, wow, there's too many problems here. Great. Well, let's pick one, do it again, right? Drill down. Here's what I'd like to see more people do. That is not my problem, right? That is not my goat rodeo. That's not mine. I'm not going to deal with it. Or to look at it and go, that's too complex, or we're not ready, or there's no value here. Value is a proxy for priority, or maybe priority is a proxy for value. But if you can answer the questions cleanly and come away with some semblance of, yep, this is the problem I got to focus on, then you can get to what I call the best next step. It's not the next best step. It's the best next step. It's the best thing you can do next. Singular. Not, all right, well, here's 37 things, go. No one can do 37 things. If you're getting coaching or feedback and they give you 37 things, you're going to focus on 45 and get none of them done. One step. What's the best next step? Now that you've done this, so maybe additional planning, it may be more detailed planning, it may be problem clarification, it might be, yeah, this was a dumb idea. Cool, thanks for helping me. And we move on.
Is that your number one rule for communication then, is to start at the beginning with this kind of straight talk exercise and then filter down? Or what is your number one rule for clear
Yeah, it's funny.
communication?
I didn't know I had one until you said that. But it turns out, and I think I've been asking, like, what problem are we trying to solve for about 8 years? And so, like, people know when I come, I'm going to ask that question. But it's interesting because if I get somebody, right, like when I'm working with leaders, like they may have a important communication they want to, they want to work with me, and we'll workshop it out. And I'll always start with, what problem are you trying to solve and why is this valuable? Now, I might twist it and I might say, okay, why is it valuable to this person? Why would they care, right? We're really going to get more to that straight talk to it. There's a level of straight talk, it's kind of like a next level-ish thing where you say, okay, I'm now going to answer these questions, but from 3 different perspectives. So like if you want clarity, that's how you start to get clarity. The other thing I add into is what I call the 3 rounds. First round's a discovery round, no edits. Second round's a dialogue round. It's not discussion, it's not debate. Dialogue's meant for understanding, not for winning a point. And then the third round is you distill. I frankly abhor consensus. I don't think consensus is very good. I think value should prevail. And so you should distill down to the value. And the value is not clear, lather, rinse, repeat. So like if you think about the perspectives, there's a person who's asking the question, there's a person who's answering it, and there's a person who's going to assess it. I like alliteration. But like, what you're looking for is somebody who has a different perspective, because from that, you're going to get a more complete, you're going to get a more accurate, you're going to get a more clear picture. And that helps you start to figure those different types of things out. So it does turn out that straight talk really is where I start. And it really starts by saying, cool, what problem are you trying to solve? And you could say, well, it's not a problem. Okay, it's then use it colloquially. What are you trying to do? Mm-hmm. That is where it starts, because, and it's a what, like Simon Sinek talks about, start with why. That's great if you're Simon Sinek. I need to know what are you doing? Because the root of friction is we are saying the same words, but we are not talking about the same what. We are not doing the same thing. Start with what? Clear it up for me. And then we can branch off from there.
That actually transitions to the next part of our show perfectly, which is three questions that we always ask our guests.
Okay.
Are you ready for those three
I'm
questions?
ready.
It's where we get deep here.
Let's go.
And this has been fascinating because you've given me a lot to think about. In fact, I'm ready to go back and re-listen to everything and take notes about all of this, because there is so much here, and you have presented it in a
Oh,
clear
cool.
way that
Oh,
gives
good.
us a
Thanks.
lot to think about. But let me ask you this. What's one thing that would have made your life, your professional life, a whole lot easier if you had been taught it back in the day, let's say high school, college, or whatever? What's one thing about writing, communicating, getting clear that would have made your life easier?
Give yourself time and space. We're taught from a young age. Oh, I know the answer. Raise your hand. Right? I know. Or the kids who don't call on me. Like I'm shying away from it. But we're so fixated on, did we have the right thing to say? Did we have the right response? Did we do the whatever? And as I get older and as I reflect back on this, my other thing, and I think it lumps into it, is ask more questions. Like, oddly enough, seek more clarity first, which is funny. I'm pretty sure Covey talked about that and others along the way. But like, if you ask about it, when it comes to communicating or it comes to writing, it's really just get your thoughts together. And the best way to get your thoughts together is both either to have a process, right? Make it visual. That's like the newer thing I'm learning is make it visual. Like, write it down, sketch it out, do something. I love mind mapping. I love mind mapping by hand. Just get the ideas out, see them, find the connections, but then give yourself some space. So we're not comfortable saying to somebody, I hear what you just asked me. I don't have a clear answer on that yet. When do you need that by? Can I think about this overnight and get back to you tomorrow? And if
Mm.
you do that to most people, they're like, oh, yeah, that's cool. Cool. I might have some more questions. Is it cool if I shoot you an email, some questions? Yeah. Okay, good.
Well, our second question is a writing rule or a communication rule that we hear a lot about. And this may tie into what you just said, that doesn't seem to serve you quite so much in your actual writing life. Often our guests will talk about the proper way to use a colon or the proper way to use a semicolon or things like that. But we've been talking today here with you about some bigger ideas. So, what is a general rule, whether writing or otherwise, that doesn't serve us in the real world?
Yeah, that's great. My initial instinct on this, and it's kind of fascinating. I've often thought Stephen King on writing will say, I don't follow structure, which is not true. So either he's just an absolute savant, or the structure is so ingrained he doesn't pay attention to it. I grew up a fan of Bruce Lee, and Bruce Lee had a simple mantra that you borrow what works and you discard the rest. And so my instant thought here is, I have no idea like what bad advice I got along the way because I discarded it. But
Mm.
what I will see, what I see a lot, and I think these might be related. People will use templates to try to create communication, and I think it's a really bad idea, because and the distinction I would make is, if you want to teach somebody a recipe, cool, because recipes have room for variance. But templates, they try to shoehorn stuff in. It doesn't make any sense. And so similarly, I see a lot of people say, well, I have to outline my thoughts before I write them. I don't actually don't dis. I have a writing coach I worked with who's brilliant, and she suggested to me that you can outline when you're done, but you don't outline at the beginning. And when I wrote Into the Breach, that's actually one of the things that I learned was, I had a moment. It's kind of funny. It's like the all is lost moment. I was feeling really dejected, and I got what was some awesome feedback about how the book was completely redundant and not structured properly, and all the great stuff was buried. Like, that shit. That's not fun to hear, right? But it's great feedback. And my solution to it was to reverse outline the entire book. And all of a sudden, I saw all the things I had wrong. So, what I've come to appreciate is, if you have ideas in you, you should get the ideas out. Now, there's a way to prepare them, but get the ideas out first, then organize them second. But then the corollary to this is, please do more revision. Like, like maybe the thing is the stuff that they didn't teach us enough was everybody's like, I outlined my ideas and I followed this format and I sent it and nobody did anything. Cool. Well, because it was void of any emotion or feeling. You didn't talk how you wrote. You don't write how you talk. The whole thing's a freaking mess. Also, by the way, did you edit it at all? Like revise? Did you even pretend to revise it? Like, please start there. So, like, I know it's not the direct answer to your question, but I think that we're taught a lot of formulaic things that we didn't realize they were just formulas. Use them if they help you, but then once you develop your style, let them go. Figure out who you are and write. But then the flip side to it is, and then revise. The work of writing is in revision, and readers, like, there's no better way to thank a reader than to give them something that's properly revised.
As someone who deals with a lot of people, leaders and otherwise, right? What is something you wish people knew about writing in the business world?
It is insanely valuable. They don't realize that when they're like, writing is clarity for you. Writing is clarity for other people. Writing means you don't have open loops in your head. Writing means you know where to find stuff. Now there's the stuff around it. It's bizarre to me the people that will tell me that they can't write, um, because I don't know how. I don't know how that's possible. I mean, they are writing. They're just not. They're not doing it with any sort of structure or any sort of intention. And I think that in the business world, the ability to communicate clearly and to persuade and to recognize that people who are overwhelmed and in nonstop meetings and not thinking clearly, they don't have time. I used to call it the information buffet or the information smorgasbord. And the idea is, well, there's something for everybody. They'll all eat. That's never worked. It doesn't work. Our brains look at that and say, well, that's not worth it, right? They shut down. It's an instant shutdown. And so, what I wish more people knew is that writing is really important and it's totally in your wheelhouse. You can absolutely do it. It's not something you're born with. You can develop the craft. Same as speaking. Some people are good at it. Some people can learn to be great at it. But the way that you communicate and the clarity with which you communicate, you want to increase your economic value, that's how you do it. You want to get new positions and jobs, that's how you do it. You want to influence, even if you lack the authority or the perception of authority, that's how you do it. You want to ease change, that's how you do it.
We have another segment on our podcast where we do help our listeners and our clients, and it's called the Doctor's Diagnosis segment. And our clients, our listeners submit their writing ailment, and we write prescriptions for them to fix their writing woes. So here's a writing ailment this time, and it comes from a business owner who has a small team of employees working for them. This owner says, I want to grow my business by 50%, and I finally have the right team to make this happen. We have 5 different initiatives to gain clients now, and I want to do about 7 more initiatives this year. I trust my team, and they're excited to grow. Right now, I tell my team my big goal for each initiative, and then I expect them to carry out that initiative. But my team members seem to be all over the place, and they're not doing exactly what I had in mind. How can I make my thinking clearer so my team can carry out these initiatives on their own without much intervention from my part? Because, quite frankly, I don't have the time to do that intervention. How can I set them up for success?
All right, there's a lot here to unpack. So we're gonna have to go a little straight talk, right? So this is gonna be honesty, but with empathy and a lot of love. And I get it as a business. First of all, growing your business by 50%, think bigger. That's not big enough. That's by half, right? Stop. You need. It's a concept. It's a nascent concept I'm working on. But I'm calling it goal gravity, right? I don't like pushing. I'm a catalyst pull. I want to reduce friction and I want to increase excitement and emotion and connection on the other side. I want to pull something through. We're going to grow by 50%. How about 500%? 500% sounds a lot more exciting to me. By the way, I'd rather try for 500% and only get 50 than try for 50% and get 20, right? Go for the 500. So first of all, that's not exciting enough. But the next thing, so I have 5 different initiatives right now and I want to do 7 more. No, focus, clarity, right? But also, I finally have the right team to do this and I trust them, but they're all failing and they can't get any of it done. Do you have the right team? How do you know that? Back to clarity, right? What problem are you trying to solve? What problem are they trying to solve? How did you communicate that to them? So those are the two first things, like right off the bat, I look at that. If I work with, right, so three, if you look at successful businesses, use the rule of three, you can have three goals. Your three goals can have three objectives. Size your objectives for the quarter, force yourself to do it. And then you can break those down further. So if you tell me you've got 5 goals, right, 5 different initiatives right now, and you want to do 7 more, but you want to grow the business, listen, there's only 1 or 2 of those are going to be the money makers. Go figure those out, right? Use the Pareto principle. Find a 20% that gets you 80% of the results, double down on that. Because the next 20% will get you, I don't know, some other 96% of your results. So so you start working on that thing. If you want to delegate to somebody else, right? And we always want to talk about accountability. So whether you want to talk about accountability or not, let's talk about delegation. So if I'm going to give something to somebody else, the absolute first thing they need is clarity. What problem are they trying to solve? Why is it valuable to solve this problem now? And in this case, maybe instead of asking how can we deliver the value faster, I need a criteria question. I need to know how we'll assess success. So it's either an event or it's a number or it's a something. With that level of clarity, then I have to give them ownership over the results. So when I read they're not doing exactly what I had in mind, correct. They should be doing what they had in mind. So if you trust them, if this is the right team and you trust them, and you've communicated the clarity, the problem, the value, and the expected outcome, the criteria for success, and they've demonstrated understanding of that, then you have to give them the agency and let them take the ownership of that. Then you can give them regular feedback on the process. And this is where I really like it when people show their work. And we have in corporate America today, we don't show our work. We don't write it down. We don't share it. But the leaders that I work with, when they get comfortable, here's what I'm working on. Here's what I'm thinking. It's 20% baked. Let's go. Yeah, they do great. They're fine because they get over the fear of being wrong to realize we have more opportunity to be right. It's right. It's not about whether you're right or wrong. It's can you get to the right path or do the right stuff. So somebody who says this to me and says, look, they need a lot of intervention from me. Well, that means they didn't get enough structure. You asked them to do something they didn't know how to do, or you didn't give them enough guide rails to do it, or the conditions are unrealistic, or there's a lack of clarity on it, or there's a misconnect on the expectations. And so the way that I would solve this, right? So again, we're going to try to do more of a diagnosis, and I'm a big believer that prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. But based on what we've been presented with is, I would think bigger, and then I would narrow down to no more than 3 initiatives. So what are the 3 most impactful initiatives you have, and how does that work best with your team based on what their current capabilities are? Right now let's tie this back. This is tying back then to their unique value and their economic value. Something for you might be low economic value, but somebody else in your team, it's the next step in their growth, and it lets them generate more economic value. Great. Delegate. Get rid of it. But does that mean because you told them to go do it, they know how to do it? No. So you either need to give them total agency, or you need to work a couple sessions with them and figure out how you best delegate and they best take the delegation. And there's a ton of different ways to do that. But it's still going to come back to clarity of thinking, right? So I would still go back to the straight talk starter. But the parameters on this, I mean, yeah, murky goal, murky initiatives, team that you trust, but you don't think any of them are doing it right. There's some disconnects there.
Sounds like they do need to try your straight talk. They may also need to check out your newsletter. Michael, you have 2 cool, really neat things that people can check out, the newsletter, and also you have office hours. Can you tell us a little bit about both?
Yeah. So the office hours is fun. It's a community of people. So you do not have to be in security to come to office hours. These are people. I love this group. It's a very comfortable place to come and just be yourself. You can be on camera. You don't have to be on camera. You can ask questions. You don't. And it's people that are interested in seeking truth. They want different perspectives, and they're comfortable being in a place where we don't have to agree, but we disagree agreeably. We get together every Friday at noon Eastern for 1 hour. Sometimes it goes a little longer. And I love watching the friendships and the connections that blossom there, and the way that people genuinely want to help each other out. And it's free as in beer. There's no puppies to take care of, no sales pitch from me or anybody else for that matter. It's very similar to a mastermind style, salon style mastermind. where you get together and we do our best when we help other people think through their challenges by, clarifying it and getting other perspectives and talking about these different types of things. The way that you get access to that is through the newsletter. So this is not clear on my website, and it's on my list of things to fix. It's just not the highest list. So if you go to the website, securitycatalyst.com/office hours, it has a thing like, I want to attend or whatever. That gets you the newsletter, and the newsletter is taken on a life of its own. So the newsletter started as, this is how you get to office hours, and I send you the Zoom link. And because I'm a security person, it's a new Zoom link every week, because Zoom bombing and everything during the pandemic kind of convinced me there was a different approach. I haven't figured out how to uncouple. Actually, I figured out how to decouple them, but I don't have time to do it yet. The newsletter has actually become really fun. So it's me writing. Like, it's literally me sitting down and writing. Again, nothing to promote, no links to everything. It's me saying, hey, this is a reflection I've had on this journey. So we're on this journey through chaos. We're looking for clarity. And in that, we're trying to figure out, how do we communicate what counts? How do we build collaborative relationships? And how do we deliver value faster? So with my own experiences and the experiences of office hours and the wonderful high performance leaders and their teams I get to work with, I pick up nuggets all the time. And then I take some of those nuggets and I distill them down. I give myself a parameter of like 300-ish words ish. And I pay attention to the formatting and stuff, just to give somebody one thing, right? One idea, one concept, one thing that they can try in their lives to just be a little bit better on that journey. And they're always an invitation for discussion. And so they then sometimes set up what we talk about on office hours, or people can hit me back with an email. Hey, I'm trying this, or I tried this, or I tried your straight talk thing. It worked great. I tried it. It didn't work. What did I do? What do I do different? Because you probably didn't do anything wrong. So,
What is that email that people can reach you at, and are there other ways that people can reach you?
yeah, I'm actually working on improving the ways people can reach me. It's simply the best is through the website. Just go to securitycatalyst.com and there's like a contact me page, and there's even like a little button. Now the button I'm going to fix, there's a thing called video ask, and in right quick, I'm going to put that up. So then if you want to send me an audio, or you want to send me a video, or you just want to do a text or whatever, like, there you go. Like, I'll meet you where you are and we'll communicate in whatever way you like best.
I love it. We've been talking with Michael Santarcangelo here on the Writing Docs podcast. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today.
I had a blast.
I have too, and you have given me so much to think about. It's been an absolute pleasure. So I hope you'll come back.
Absolutely. Happy to come back.
Thank you, Michael.
Yes, thank you. Make sure you, as our listeners, check out Michael's newsletter and office hours. I know I'm going to be putting that on my list. This is the Writing Docs podcast from Hurley Wright, signing off. May your week be filled with good health and good writing.
Hurley Wright can help your employees learn better strategies to be effective and efficient writers. Hurley Wright has helped numerous companies solve their writing issues, and we can help your team too. Contact us at 877-249-7483 or email us at info@hurleywright.com, and one of our writing experts will be in touch.